thing on the agenda sheet is the same old about the lead, doing the audio, muting yourself during the presentation. Use chat. You want to ask Adam a question, and same old drill. We're getting pretty good at it. Okay, next one. Pam, do you have any updates on membership?
Yes, in fact, we have a returning member, Linda Hudson, that came back. And also we have a new member, James Campbell. But I don't know, James, are you here tonight? I guess not. Okay. So there you go. Two members since last month.
Also, Pam, I paid tonight, so got another returning
there
member.
You go. Another returning member tonight. That's total three members.
Good. So we have what, 68, we have what, 71 now?
74, 75 now, 75.
Okay, we'll update that next month. Okay, next slide. Yeah, this just is the reminder. Don't forget to go to our website and our Facebook page to keep up. Kathy, every Monday, puts a new thing on Facebook to keep everybody up to speed on what's going on. And I think it allows members that have been someplace, they can post photographs for everybody to see. Okay. Chuck, you want to talk about this one?
Okay, I'll unmute myself. I'm gonna have to get my wife to get this dog. She's driving me nuts. The library workshop series. We've been having workshops in the library the first Saturday of every month this year, and the last one that Kathy did, the last one on night photography. It was really pretty detail oriented, very rich in detail and technical stuff. The next one coming up is on mobile editing with your mobile device, iPhone, iPad, that kind of thing. It's not going to be as technical or as hard. It's sort of a fun time to go crazy with your phone. I do a lot of editing on my phone. I have a lot of fun with it. You can do serious editing, or you can just have fun doing a lot of different filters and stuff. That's the only other ones we have planned so far this year. We probably will have one on portrait photography as soon as the library opens up again with Jim Everett.
Is that mobile editing using Lightroom or what?
Well, it's going to be, we'll talk about different editors. Snapseed, just a second. I'm going to have to, sorry about that. Snapseed and Lightroom. There's also Photoshop for the iPad that's pretty darn functional. It's almost just like Photoshop. So we'll talk about those things. We continue also having our Zoom meetings for photographers on Wednesdays. We have good turnouts. We've been having this for about a year, and the topic is nothing, anything you want to talk about, really. And so we continue doing those things.
We've solved most of the world's problems, haven't we?
We have. We've gone all the way from what is a bidet and how it works to all sorts of other things. That's right. Sometimes we talk about photography, and that's been fun. It's a good group. So we do that. We have a post-processing SIG special interest group that's scheduled for the third Thursday of every month. We really haven't done much on that. I'd like to get ideas on what we should be meeting on and talking about in that SIG. So, the third Thursday of the month is this next Thursday coming up. We can decide whether or not we want to meet. I'll send out an email on it.
Okay.
Okay. And that's that. I'll go next slide. Mm-hmm. So that's the post-processing SIG.
Yeah, the post-processing SIG.
Yeah.
The other one in here is Jim Everard's portrait SIG. It's going to happen sometime in July and August. We've got to get access to a room at the pool if they ever open it back up, and I think we're getting close to that. But next month, or we'll have something on Facebook or on the website about that. I know Jim's anxious to do it. the one thing I will say is we need some subjects for the portraiture. One family that was our favorite subject family moved back to Sweden, but they're not available. So if you've got grandkids, kids, dog, I don't know about dogs, but you know, we'd welcome the opportunity to use them as our models. Okay. But Jim will keep everybody up to date on that.
Okay.
Okay. Is Chris here?
No, Chris has got some other things going on today. He told me wasn't
Okay.
going to be able to
Well,
meet. We had our grand winner of this month of our contest. The theme was backyard, and the grand winner was this little feeding time. And the winner is Emily Murphy. Emily submitted 2 pictures. They both did really well. This is the one that won. Congratulations. Congratulations, Emily.
And next meeting, the topic is heat
Heat.
and why.
Oh, we ought to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody try to get creative on heat.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Day trips. Ann, do you want to talk about the trip to the color factory?
Well, a few of us went to the color factory. Gee, that's there we go. That's better. And yes, there were a lot of photo opportunities, and there was a lot of time to pretend that you were a teenager too. It was a lot of fun. And this was some of the photos, it looks like on the left, that Randy took. Very nice. And I would say that, you know, it seemed kind of pricey, but I think that you got your money's worth, actually. For one thing, they gave you ice cream and candy in just about every room you went in, and it was well run. It had a lot of, I would say, personality. They were asking on the survey, how would you describe it? And it's hard because it's not a museum, and it's not a it's not really amusement park, but it's somewhere in between.
You could describe it as non-dietetic.
You might want to watch your sugar intake if you're worried about that, because no, it was you got at the very last we had this I don't see it, it was the balls, it was the moonwalk, and so you could fall into balls, and then afterwards in this hallway here they served you some ice cream, black ice cream. So there are a bunch of little kids with black mouths. It was really cute. But I would highly recommend it. It's good to go with people, but not with a big group. And definitely take your teenagers that love to take pictures of themselves, and also little children that have a lot of fun with this. There's no such thing as don't touch here.
And for everybody's benefit, there's another facility somewhat similar to this out on Highway 6 called Seismic. And I took my granddaughter there. We had a blast. And it's kind of an art museum. I think it's artists put a lot of these rooms and displays together.
Yeah, they feature specific artists if you go online, I think, and look at that. There's another new one coming up with candy and color. So I need to get the name of that, but it's probably the same price. These are all about the same. It was fun though. Thanks for putting it together, Ann.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Had a good time.
Yeah. Ann, do you have any idea? Well, we're looking for ideas for day trips, aren't we?
Well, summertime is rough because there's so many people out, and you need also an indoor venues. So the next one that is actually scheduled is August 22nd for the Sandcastle contest. It's not, obviously it's an outdoor venue, but then it's the beach. So, you know, you need one for the beach, I think.
Yeah.
But other than that, you know, we've gone to Galveston in the summer and it was pretty miserable. We've done other things in the summer. You know, it's a good time to go to museums. Not necessarily with a large group. You know, I would say maybe we could get a couple of people together and go see the new MFAH wing we've been to the Butterfly Museum, so been there, done that last year.
Yeah.
And summer's rough. We have so many ideas coming up for fall and even winter and spring. Summer's just a rough time.
The
On
museum-
Friday, John Gray and I are going to make a scouting trip, so we may have something to report for another.
Museum of
True.
Natural Science has an amazing dinosaur exhibit,
Yeah.
and that's just stunning. It's like
Yeah.
world-class dinosaur exhibit. If we ever want to add that to the list.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Well, I love going to the Museum of Science.
And Ian mentioned the Rich Kinder building of the MFA is open. That may be worth a trip. I'm going to
Yeah,
try.
it's definitely worth it.
Okay.
I was there 2 weeks ago with my sister for an event, and it was
Right.
really good.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was the Ernesto Neto installation that was actually in the law building. And it's this thing that you walk through. I mean, it's like walking through a giant fishing net off the ground with, floats in it or something. It was amazing. And then we went into the Kinder building and had lunch there, walked through a rainbow tunnel. People were commenting on the rainbow tunnel, and my sister said, at least it's not the Rainbow Bridge. So that got a laugh from everybody. But yeah, it's way cool. Definitely worth it.
Okay. Well, that's a possibility. Okay. Next slide. Out of town activities. We covered this last week. I think we have about 12 people going. There's still time if somebody decides they want to go, but most of us have already got airline reservations made, hotel reservations made, and the challenge has been the rental cars. The rental cars are making up for lost time from the pandemic year. It's ridiculous what they're charging for some of these car rentals, but I think we've got that under control. Okay, that's all I have about that. Okay, our speaker tonight is with us, Adam. Is it Schallau? Is that how I pronounce it?
Schallau. Is that close enough? But Adam Schallau.
Yeah, I have an SCH name, but I'm SK is the way mine's pronounced.
Ah.
Yeah, Adam, we're going to have a fun time tonight. He's a professional photographer and workshop instructor. We got to know Adam through Pam and Mark Walton. They attended one of his workshops, and I think one of our other members, John Gray, is going to attend one. He does some of the workshops are, I guess, at the rim of the Grand Canyon. He also conducts the 18-day raft trips through the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. He's well known. His photographs are published in many magazines: National Geographic, National Park Service, Audubon Society, New Mexico Magazine, Arizona Highways. So he's quite accomplished with his work with the camera, and we're looking forward to it. Most of us have seen the Grand Canyon, but I don't think we've been able to capture what Adam's going to show us we're capable of capturing. So Adam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome.
Let me stop this share and you can start yours.
Okay. And I'll have to remember how to do all this. It's been a few months. And so let's see. Can you guys see the full introduction image there now?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I'm on a Mac, and sometimes there's a struggle with that for some reason. But hey, thank you for the lovely introduction. I am here tonight to share with you a little bit about who I am as a photographer, as an artist. But I really want to share with you just what a special place Grand Canyon is. I'll share with you a bit about my story of how I came to Grand Canyon, how I fell in love with it. And the reason I do that is, I want people to see it a different way. Hopefully, I'm guilty of, on my first visit, I came here and kind of thought it's a big hole in the ground. I'll be a one and done visit and never come back. That came close to being that way, actually. But yeah, so why don't we'll just jump in and get started. And I tend to run really, really long on these things. So I'm going to start a timer to kind of keep myself honest here. But yeah, so let's get started. So first things first, what do all photographers love to talk about? Themselves. But everybody seems to always want to know about gear. So we'll start with gear. We'll get that out of the way. I actually shoot 2 different camera systems nowadays. I grew up on film, shooting Canon bodies mostly, quickly transitioned into digital about 17, 18 years ago with the first digital Rebel, if you guys remember that. If you shot one, 6 megapixels, wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Nowadays, though, I'm shooting a combination of Sony gear and Fuji medium format. So this is my Sony kit. I typically go out with about 3 lenses. You'll see 4 here. I don't like to carry that much gear. I've got a bad back from a car accident a long time ago, so I just try to go light when I can. But my kit typically consists of those 3 lenses, some filters, and I'll be talking a bit about filter use. I do use them less and less today, and I'll get into why. I keep a lightning trigger with me, which you'll, I don't know if my mouse pointer is showing up, but I keep a lightning trigger with me during our monsoon season. 2 headlamps, because if you've ever been somewhere as dark as northern Arizona and your headlamp fails and new batteries don't fix it, that's a problem. So yeah, 2 headlamps, first aid kit, and otherwise that's it. I think it's pretty simple. It probably looks complex to some folks. So again, my Sony kit right now consists of a 12 to 24 2.8 lens, 24-70, and a 200 to 600. Where I'm kind of trying to figure out what I want to do between that 70 and 200 range. I'm not a big fan of their 70 to 200 2.8 or f4. I do love their 100 to 400, but that's a lot of overlap with what I already have. My primary landscape kit, though, is my Fuji system. And for that, I'm currently shooting with the 50R. So if you're not familiar with these cameras, that's physically a larger sensor. So you have the smaller full frame sensor, of course, APS-C being even smaller. And then the 50R sensor is, depending on how you measure things, it could be anywhere from 70 to 100% larger than a full frame sensor. I then carry, again, 3 lenses, sometimes 4. Now, these lenses are, you'll see the 23 mils, my wide angle. That's actually like an 18 on a full frame camera. The 32-64 is my primary lens, and that's similar to a 25 to 50 on a full frame. 45 to 100, sharpest lens I own, also the biggest and heaviest, so it stays home a lot. And then the 100 to 200, which is like a 80 to 160. So that's my gear. The reason I love the Fuji system is it's big sensor with big pixels. Just great tonal range, beautiful colors. The Fuji colors are just wonderful. So those are the main, and the glass is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. It is a slow camera. On a good day, it shoots at 3 frames per second, but for landscapes, I'm usually not too worried about that. So a little bit about me and how I became a photographer and how that led to Grand Canyon. So back in 99, I was living in San Antonio, and my wife and I would do annual trips out west. And after one trip, we walked into our local camera store to pick up film, and on the walls were tons of photographs of places I'd just been: Grand Canyon, St. Francis de Assisi Church in Taos, or Ranchos de Taos, New Mexico, Colorado, places in Utah. And wow, these are really cool photos. Well, it turned out they were my pictures. The camera shop had printed them without asking, but they wanted to do it as a surprise. They liked my work. And one of the people working the shop kind of took me under her wing and started mentoring me. And about 2 years later, she said, "Adam, get out of retail and go become a photographer, a landscape photographer." Now, it's the worst advice you can give to anyone. It's a really tough business, but I'm thankful she sent me down this road. I said, well, I don't feel very creative in San Antonio. Now I go back home and shoot all sorts of things. Now I go back and feel very creative, but at the time I didn't. I said, where should I move to? And she said, move to Sedona, Arizona, or move to Taos, New Mexico. Well, we ended up in Taos and very quickly found that we were broke, jobless, and trying to survive. We did eventually find jobs, my wife and I, and we ended up finding a place to live that was about 1 block from this famous church that's on the screen. Now, I was basically working minimum wage, and I could only afford 1 roll of film per month. That was buying the film and getting it developed. Well, I'll tell you, that teaches you discipline real quick when every shot has to count, or you feel that it has to count. Almost every day after work, I would walk to this church. And if you've never been there, this is a famous church. Ansel Adams photographed it. Georgia O'Keeffe painted it. And again, it was a block away, so I didn't have to spend money on gas. And I would go there and I would study light, shape, form, texture. But the first thing I ever actually made there, my first good image I made there was actually this photograph of a dog called Paco, who had walked underneath a horse being ridden by a local Native American man who was, let's say, had too many drinks. Dog walked under the horse threw the rider, and he started to chase the dog all over the courtyard there at the church. And I wanted to make sure this dog didn't die. So I slapped the wall and said, Paco, come. And he jumped up on the wall and posed for me. And this was the start of my photography career. It was my first print that I ever sold. There's a lot of things wrong with it, but I was proud of it. Over the years, I kept photographing the church. I eventually moved into doing digital black and white. So shooting color, shooting raw in the camera, but with the intent of converting to black and white and doing a lot of localized adjustments. So I do a lot of adjustment brushes for clarity, contrast, some exposure control as well, but a lot of essentially modern dodging and burning. Continued kind of down that black and white path for a long time. These are all just different ruin sites or abandoned sites in New Mexico. This one on the left is actually in Texas. If you know the drive from Fort Stockton to Carlsbad, New Mexico, there's a little town called Orla, and that's where this place is. Besides landscapes, I love to photograph people when I have the opportunity. I was the official photographer for the Taos Pueblo for their powwow at one time, and these were all officially sanctioned by the powwow committee. Love to photograph old things, but I love fall color. I have very diverse interests when it comes to photography. These are patterns in ice. So I'm kind of all over the map, and having a project is really good for me, which is why I come to Grand Canyon now. Oh, forgot these. I've really gotten into ICM. If any of you guys are doing that, that's in-camera movement or intentional camera movement. So long exposure and moving the camera during the exposure. These are all trees in our local forests here. Love Native American ruins. This is Pecos National Monument in Santa Fe. The Bears Ears region, which for good and bad has been in the news quite a bit the last few years. I think it'll be in the news again here real soon for good reasons. But I love the Southwest. So really my home, photographically speaking, is what we call the Colorado Plateau or the Four Corners region. The plateau is part of that region. I just love the desert. I love mountains too, but I love photographing the desert. So Grand Canyon, how did I come to Grand Canyon? Made my first trip in 1999, and I'd planned on spending 3 days, 2 nights, and that was just camping and shooting. I was shooting film, brand new to photography, really had no idea what I was doing. And I'll tell you, when I first walked up to the rim, I got up there and I was overwhelmed. And I think that's a normal reaction. But as a photographer, I was overwhelmed. You ask yourself, how do you photograph this grand landscape? And that's a challenge, not just at Grand Canyon, but anywhere that has a truly immense landscape. Sally and I, my wife and I, we camped one night, froze our butts off, and very quickly decided we couldn't survive late September in northern Arizona. And so that 3-day, 2-night trip became 1 night and a very early departure the next morning. And I thought, this is it. I probably will never be back again. Fast forward to May of 2008, we're living in Taos now, and we were supposed to be going to Capitol Reef National Park. it was end of May, and they were forecasted to get 15 inches of snow. And I thought, boy, I've only got 2-wheel drive. Where can I go that's going to have decent roads? So we ended up at Grand Canyon. We spent 5 days there, 5 nights, 6 days camping, and we survived it. We were better prepared that time. But what I got to see was I got to see the canyon full of clouds, rain, snowfall, dramatic light. It was really an incredible experience. And that kind of began this process of falling in love. It was also during this visit that my wife read about the park's Artist in Residence program. So we went home and I immediately applied for that program thinking I don't have a chance in you know what of getting in. Turned out 303 people applied for 3 positions for the 2009 season, and I was one of the 3 selected. To this day, I assume it was some kind of clerical error, but I'm thankful for the experience. I got to go and live in the park for almost a month. What was really great about it was that park rangers, the concessionaire staff, they all wanted to share with me the places that they knew made Grand Canyon special. And if it hadn't been for them, I don't know that I ever would have seen it in a different way other than what we see in the postcards and a lot of the other photo books. They wanted to tell me about their favorite places, best times of day. And they're not all photographers, but they had a really good idea of where to go. And I'm so thankful for it. And so often in photography, we think of, especially landscape photography, as a solitary endeavor. It's man or woman against the landscape, against the environment. And we're out there to conquer and make our photo. But I've found that my best photos have been a collaboration with people who know the places better than I. So in the Artist in Residence program sent me down that path. Nowadays, I get to spend about 70 days a year photographing the canyon, and that's thanks to a decision we made in 2012 to move here to Flagstaff. Flagstaff's about an hour and a half from the canyon, so when the weather looks like it's going to be conducive to the kind of photos I want to make, I jump in the car and go. Now that 70 days, some of that spent making my own photos. It's also leading workshops, working with youth programs. It's all sorts of things. It's not just purely my own time, but again, usually 70 days. The youth programs, by the way, is a big part of what I do, and I could talk about this all day. It'll get kind of boring, but it's another one of the things I encourage photographers to do. Find a way to mentor youth programs in the photographic arts and helping them become ambassadors for our parks. That's a really big part of what I do. Oops, got a little behind on my slides here. So let's look at some pictures. So the grand landscape, what does that mean? What kind of photos do I make? So when we walk up to the rim, we typically want to start, we think, okay, I'm going to put on my 12mm lens and take the whole thing in. It's usually the absolute wrong thing to do in a big, big landscape. What you end up doing is kind of showing everything while revealing nothing. The viewer's left going, what am I supposed to see? What does the artist want me to feel? That said, I still like making my big panoramas like this one, big multi-stitched image, multi-panel stitched image. But what I really like to try and do when I'm making photos of the landscape is say, what do I want the viewer to realize? What secrets do I want to reveal to them? And that's hard to do. It's hard to tell a story with landscape photography, but it is possible. This is actually one of my more famous photographs. This was my first cover with Arizona Highways. And if you're not familiar with it, there's a lot of big photographers that kind of got their start, and I'm hoping I can follow in their path. David Munch, Jack Dykinga, big people like that, personal heroes of mine, got their start with that magazine. But for example, this image, I wanted to show how Grand Canyon can turn into what I think is a painting, but capture it photographically. And what does that for us in a place like Grand Canyon and other big landscapes is atmosphere. A big part of my photography is capturing atmosphere. So on a day like today, I think we're at 3% humidity, but we have some hazy air because of wildfires that are nearby. When we have humidity though, and that's what you're seeing in this photograph, we get beautiful scattered light. So it had rained all night long. And at sunrise, that humidity started to cook off out of the canyon. The sunlight was streaming through it. I watch so many photographers, and this happens in my workshops, who they see haze or humidity, excuse me, and they pack up their camera. What are you doing? And they go, well, even the dehaze tool in Lightroom can't take care of this. I said, no, this is when this quality of atmosphere is going to make your photograph transcend photography and start becoming something more, perhaps. So when we get that sense of atmosphere, when the air quality even degrades a little bit, that's when I start thinking about where can I go to maybe face not directly into the light necessarily, but have it off to one side, or even quartering where it's kind of coming at the camera, like I'm with my hand here now. I just love shooting when we have real heavy atmosphere at the canyon. Now, I'm not going to talk about every single photo. Some of these are just pretty photos, I hope. But one of the things I've also done is I started studying the work of some of the master painters, the master artists that have painted Grand Canyon. Gunnar Woodforce, Thomas Moran, who's one of my personal favorites. If you're not familiar with him, look him up. If it weren't for Thomas Moran and some others, we may not have our national parks. And that is the power of art, and photography can be art. It has the power to help people better understand these places. Wanted to talk about this photograph. I see a lot of photos of Grand Canyon, and I'm guilty of this, where the white balance is probably much too warm. And Grand Canyon, in a lot of big landscapes, the shaded part of the landscape, as that landscape falls into shade, it should go blue. And in some cases, even very strong blues. In the film age, photographers referred to the canyon as the blue canyon. So you guys have heard of blue hour. Well, the canyon would take on very strong blue hues in the shaded parts of the canyon. You can definitely see it here, depending, of course, on your monitor calibration. So we're going to move forward a little bit because I'm watching my timer going, okay, I'm already falling behind. So I spend a lot of time exploring Grand Canyon. As I mentioned earlier, when I came here in 2008 and then again as the artist in residence in 2009, I looked at a lot of photographs initially, and I said, boy, I kept seeing a lot of repetitions, same places over and over and over again. Grand Canyon is 277 miles long. It's 10 miles wide. It's a mile plus deep. We have 4 seasons. We have 4 rims: South Rim, North Rim, East Rim, and West Rim. There's got to be a lot more to this place than what I'm seeing. I just began walking, and I am not a strong hiker, again, because of my back issues. But I just started walking the rim and exploring. And you guys get to see what I think are some of my favorite photos. There's a lot of photos I won't show you. They're not all winners, but I just spent that time exploring. And when I would find a place that I liked, I would go back to it over and over, over again. This, for example, is a place on what is called the East Rim. This is Navajo land, and unfortunately, currently closed. We don't even know if it's going to open back up. I'd only had a chance to photograph this location twice and got very lucky on my second outing there. If you look down below, you can see where there's turquoise water coming in from the left, and that is the Little Colorado River. The big river is the Colorado River. Later, I'll show you guys some pictures from down below at that confluence of the 2 rivers. But really, what Grand Canyon has come down to for me is just patience, perseverance, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I prefer cold weather over hot weather. That said, I've been down on the river when it's 108 degrees at 8 a.m. It's not fun, but I'm down there to make my photos. And I just try to push all of that aside, all of my personal discomfort. I try to push that aside. This Adam, is one of my, yeah.
Why is that Navajo area closed?
Good question. So it's closed right now due to COVID. Okay. But it actually closed, if you're not familiar with the reservation, there's very limited access to medical care and just services in general. They had a real challenge with the virus, and things are really starting to look better. The Navajo Parks and Recreation Office and Navajo tribal government have voted positively to reopen. They're just now waiting on the Navajo Nation president to sign off on it. But even pre-pandemic, the Navajo were having troubles with that area. People see photos like mine, and they want to go out there and make their own photos. Problem is, they go and rent a Camaro or a Corvette or some other two-wheel drive vehicle and try to make a 50-mile drive across the desert in a four-wheel drive area in a car that's not equipped for it. They break down, they get stranded, they end up needing search and rescue and medical care and a lot of other things. And the Navajo honestly just grew tired of it. So they just said, for now, we're shutting this all down.
Okay.
Yeah. North rim of Grand Canyon here. This is a place called Angel's Window. And this is not from an overlook. A lot of what I do, whether it's my own personal time or running workshops, is I get myself away from the handrails. That doesn't mean it's an unsafe spot. We walk the rim and we find places where people typically aren't photographing from. This is one of my personal favorite photos here. This is the last photograph I made as an artist in residence for the park. I'd had blue sky for an entire week, and you can make good photos with blue sky. I don't include the sky typically. I'll show some of those. But finally, my next to last morning, we had just the most incredible sunrise, and I almost missed this. Why? Because I had let my spirit come down, and I just thought, oh, nothing's going to happen. So I slept in. Luckily, I happened to look outside just as the eastern horizon was lighting up, and I ran to a place and set up this shot and made it. This actually ended up being the cover of Grand Canyon National Park's centennial book. So the park turned 100 2 years ago, and this is the cover image. I do a little night sky photography as well, and I like to use this image as a teaching example. I know a lot of people say you can't photograph the Milky Way when there's a full moon. Well, this was on a full moon. The moon had actually just risen. We're looking south, and the moon's come up off my left shoulder, and it's actually probably only a degree or two above the horizon. It may not even be fully above the horizon. But it was low enough that the light reflecting off the moon was not strong enough to totally wash out the scene. And I used the moon as a light painting light source to light up the cliffs of the canyon. I do, as I mentioned, I do some night sky photography. Nowadays, I don't do that more popular glowing Milky Way type shot. I can't get them published. A lot of publishers won't take them because they know it's not representative of what people are going to see. So this is the kind of shot that I do. So I'm kind of known for my storm photography at Grand Canyon. This is actually one of the few composites I've done. And I'm very clear about when I do composites. This is a composite of 18 images, and each one is 30 seconds long. I think F11 or F9 for some reason. I think I bumped something on the camera. 30 seconds long, ISO 160, shot on a Canon 5D Mark III many, many years ago now. But I wanted to show the intensity of the storm. I've got single images that have 3 and 4 strikes in it, but what I decided was I can create a longer exposure by stacking the images in Photoshop, layer masking, and creating a virtual long exposure, if you will. Very similar process to what photographers who do star trail photography are doing. This is during a temperature inversion. This is where cold air gets trapped in the canyon and the layer of hot air is on top, acting like a lid on a pot. A backlit thunderstorm, so it's just pouring down rain. The sun is getting close to setting. And if you're curious about white balance, I had someone who asked me, they said, oh, this has got to be like a shade white balance. Most of my processing is done using a daylight white balance, and that's to avoid going overly warm, and again to preserve the blues in the canyon when we get those blue tones or blue values in the shadows. Again, more atmosphere in the canyon. That's snow falling, evaporating, snow falling, melting, and turning into rain as it gets into the lower reaches of the canyon. This is the canyon when it's actually full of smoke. And I was leading a workshop, a group workshop. I think I had 7 participants. And a lot of people said, oh, I'm going to sleep in tomorrow because there's going to be smoke from a wildfire and it's going to fill the canyon. And I said, come out with me. We're going to shoot this. you know, the full moon's going to be setting. I said, it's a rare opportunity. I think we can make something. And I've actually ended up having this published in several different magazines. It created a really cool, surreal effect. So shoot no matter what. That's kind of the lesson here. Force yourself to get out and shoot. The conditions aren't what you were looking for. Too bad. Suck it up. Get out and make a photo. You'll become a better photographer for it. Same location again, pouring down rain. And I thought, boy, this is actually really cool. When the sun pops out from behind the cloud, it's going to take on this beautiful painterly effect. So again, I was doing a private workshop when I made this photo, and my client kind of put up his camera and I said, let me show you what we can do. Same location again. And I share these three photos just to illustrate how different a location can change. Obviously, this photo has this very cool tree in the shot, in the composition. But this is why I shoot places over and over and over again. I want to talk about working with layers. I love shooting with long glass. There's a reason I have that 200 to 600 lens. 100 to 400 would serve me well in these situations. But I love working with layers, looking for the art in the landscape. And so this is up around 300 to 350 millimeter. But I want to share with you the exact same scene, different time of day. So that previous photograph was sunrise. So front lit scene, sun's to my back. This scene is now almost backlit at sunset with some dust blowing into the canyon. Same scene again, just a different quality of light. And again, going a little bit wider this time. So blue sky day, someone asked me, how do you photograph a grand landscape when it's nothing but blue sky? Call it severe clear. And my solution usually is chop off the sky, get rid of it, work with layers. And that's what I've been doing in these photographs. And notice I'm not going crazy with the dehaze tool in Lightroom. I'm preserving the haze in the background of the image, because when we start shooting with longer lenses, we're now compressing the scene. How do we preserve a sense of depth in the scene? Well, if you go too heavy with contrast, too heavy with dehaze, or an S curve, if you're using tone curves, you start to flatten out the image. Yes, you reveal color in detail, but you also start to remove that sense of distance through the image. So it's a balance. You have to do some of that, but you don't want to go too far. So again, just more examples of working with long lenses and overlapping layers in the landscape. More from a temperature inversion. Again, that's where the cold air gets trapped in the canyon with a layer of hot air holding it in. But working with layers, working with long lenses. Now, I always worry that things don't come through when we're doing these Zoom sessions. You may see just what looks like sensor dust back in here. These are actually swallows or swifts that are flying around in the scene. And when I make a photograph, my goal is always to be able to make a big print. And so even though I'm looking through a tiny viewfinder or the LCD, still small to me, I'm thinking, how is this going to make it? And will these small details be revealed? And what I love doing is when I make one of these big prints, someone sees it, they walk up, and when they see that little detail, but they're looking at a big landscape, things now come into perspective for them. Working with more layers. This is actually rain again falling into the canyon. Same thing again, more rain falling into the canyon, just working with layers. And again, rain falling into the canyon, but now low angle sun. So that part that is backlit is getting those beautiful golds. And you can see the deep, deep blues and purples at the bottom of the image. So we'll look at also a little bit of the winter on the rim. A lot of people do not realize just how cold it can get here. The National Weather Service says Flagstaff is the second snowiest city in the US. We average about 100 inches of snow a season. I've seen 40 inches of snow in a 2 to 3 day storm. I've been stuck at home because of it. So Grand Canyon gets about 3/4, maybe only 2/3 of that, but we still get really good snowfalls at the canyon. And it can be an incredible time of year to visit. I made this photograph from the South Rim, and I was the only person there. Everyone else had packed up. And that comes back to getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I've got good winter clothing, but if you're not burning calories, if you're just standing at the tripod for 3 hours, you're going to get cold. So it pays off just to persevere, power through being uncomfortable, and wait for that magic moment. I had about 5 minutes to make the shots.
Adam, I thought they closed the canyon when it snowed.
They'll close certain roads. So the north rim of Grand Canyon closes seasonally from October 15th and reopens May 15th. If you drive up there in the summer, you see the reflectors on the side of the road on the posts. Instead of being what's like 40 inches tall, they're like 10 feet tall because of the amount of snow they get up there. On the south rim, it just depends on the severity of the storm. Was there ice first? But there are still plenty of places open on the south rim, even if parts of it do get closed. But yeah, it's a great question. So you are partly correct.
Adam, to those of us who are beginning photographers, can you explain just briefly what you mean by working with layers? Are you talking about taking photographs and doing the layers in Photoshop?
Oh, no, it's working with the layers in the landscapes. Let me back up a bit.
Okay.
So it's, for example, I probably should have had an example of shooting the scene really, really wide, but layers is just looking for those overlapping layers in the landscape, getting a telephoto lens and now zooming in on them to bring those layers closer together. You'll experience an effect called telephoto compression. And that's where things begin to look closer together. So foreground and background, as you zoom in, appear closer, and now you get those beautiful overlapping layers. Oh, it's a great question. Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to jump back forward here. I should have some more layered photos. We'll see. But yeah, so if you ever have an opportunity to get to the Grand Canyon during the winter, come prepared. Bring plenty of hand warmers, those little, the packets where you shake them and they heat up. Bring those with you and persevere. This photo, for example, it was -11 when I made this photo, and that's Fahrenheit, not Celsius. Brutally cold. The camera even struggled. My battery would die. I'd take it out, it's going to sound gross, put it up in my armpit to warm it up, get another battery in there and hope that one would last a while. But it's just an incredible time of year to visit Grand Canyon and see it in a way that most people don't see it. One piece of advice, don't visit between Christmas Day and New Year's. It's actually the absolute busiest week of the year for Grand Canyon National Park. Busier than summer. So we're now gonna, I'm sorry, I'm jumping forward trying to behave here and watch my time. This is another good example of working with layers. I'd walked up to the edge of this forest, and with a 24-70 or a 16-35 lens, it was cool, but I started to get too wide and show a lot of empty sky. I thought, boy, what happens if I back up 100 yards? Now get the telephoto lens on, zoom into the scene. And now what I've done is I've taken all those trees and brought them close together to where they overlap in the scene. They don't look that far apart, but foreground to background in this scene, maybe a couple 100 yards difference between this one tree and the trees that fade away in the distance. So that is working with layers with a telephoto lens. So I want to talk about the Colorado River. Earlier, I mentioned that the park, Grand Canyon National Park, is 277 miles long. We measure that in river miles. Now, the Colorado River is obviously a lot longer than that, but within the park, we have 277 miles. Most of that is inaccessible, unless you're on a raft. If you wanted to hike the length of the canyon, it's actually impossible to hike along the length of the river because you will do what's called cliffing out. You will run into a place where the river just runs into a cliff that you cannot climb. You now have to backtrack, find a side canyon, a tributary, to hike up and then come back down to get around that cliff obstacle. Hiking the length of the canyon, by some estimates, is about 750 miles of hiking. And there are people that have done it. I think we're up around 30 people. I have not done it. I would love to, but don't think I have the endurance to do that. So the river and being on a boat is a great way to experience the inner depths of Grand Canyon. Now, to try to put things into perspective here, if you look at the bottom of this photograph, you'll see some of our rafts. Those yellow rafts are 18 feet long. The river is typically around 100 yards wide. It can get a little more narrow at the most narrow point. It's a little over 90 feet. It's several hundred feet deep there. It does get up to about 150 yards wide in a few places, but it is a big river, but it's a slow river. It actually only moves at about 4 miles an hour, 3.5 to 4, until we get into the rapids, and I'll talk more about that. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenges of being a photographer and trying to work in this environment. You can jump on a trip. You can hire a commercial guide and say, I want to go on a river trip to take pictures. Most commercial river guides, they know the river, they know how to row it, but they don't know what good light is. They don't know when to be at a certain place to get the best light. It's really, really challenging. And that's one of the biggest challenges I actually face. I'm going to go out of order here. So I've been very careful about picking my team of boatmen, or we call them river guides. Boatman is the old term. They're boatmen. But I've been very careful at who I select, and they are absolutely incredible. These guys are like, they're SEAL Team 6, they're executive chefs, they're boatmen. It's amazing what all they can do. But when I look for boatmen, I look for people who have a positive attitude, who are easygoing and incredibly patient. I'm looking for people who are wilderness first responders with years of rowing and guiding experience. I'm looking for people who are eager to help us make our photos. And what I mean by that is the guides end up carrying backpacks, tripods. You know, we're getting ropes out. We're not climbing pure cliffs, but we may be on a steep hill where we've set a rope for stability. And the guides will carry the backpacks, and they're just absolutely fantastic. But above all else, I'm looking for someone who's passionate about Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. In the end, they understand that, again, this is a team effort. It's a collaboration between the guides and the photographers. So for the photographers, what are the challenges we face? Number one, it's protecting your gear from the water and from the sand. Battery management. I've had a few people try solar. It doesn't work. We're in the shade too often. We bring battery packs with us to charge up with, but all it takes is one thing breaking. I end up telling people, and I do this for myself, I bring one battery for every day I'm on the river. Personal energy management. Well, what does that mean? How do I keep my energy level up so I can be productive and be making good photographs? It's hard when you're down there because you want to do night photography. You're on the raft during the day. In the morning and the evenings, you're doing your big landscape photos. So it does become a challenge to find time to sleep. And then when you get home, you go, oh my gosh, I've got 7,000 images. So how do you begin calling them? That's one of the biggest challenges. So just a few pictures of our guides. They're usually a ragtag looking bunch, but they are experts at what they do. I'm standing here with the guides because we had an incident in 2019 where the boat I was in, the guide had injured himself, not rafting, did not tell people. He was not authorized to carry passengers, but he was carrying cameras. And he got us into a situation where we flipped. And after that, I had to take over rowing with no experience. So I quickly became a boatman. But yeah, the boatmen are absolutely incredible people. The guy up here on the top left is David Edwards, National Geographic photographer. If you've ever seen the photographs of the Mongolian men with their golden eagles from back in the 80s and 90s, that was all Dave. Dave was also the senior boatman on the river, 500 plus trips, and he mentored me in rowing and where to shoot, when to shoot. Really great guy. On the right is one of our boatmen leaning on our dry bags. These are the bags that we put our backpacks in to protect our gear. And you can see a lot of that stuff like in this bottom left photo. So we buy this and use the same dry bags that a lot of special forces use to protect their gear in the water. And I'll tell you, having been through a flip on the river, two things work really well. Our dry bags worked great. I had a Fuji GFX 100 on loan. That's their 100 megapixel medium format camera. They gave it to me and said, go have fun. And I was a little worried about it because of what it cost. All my gear survived. And part two of what works real well in the river are the life jackets. That thing did its job. You wear it properly and it works. As I mentioned before, they're kind of like executive chefs. They take really good care of us on the river. They keep us well fed. They lead us on our hikes. They keep us safe and they make sure we get our photos. And at the end of the trip, they make sure we're still smiling. So I have a lot of respect for the guides. Without these men and women, we would not be able to do what we do down in Grand Canyon.
Adam?
Yeah.
Are the trips that you take on the river, are they 100% photographers on the trip?
No. We typically aim for 12 to 16 people, but I prefer to not have anything more than 12 photographers on the trip. So we encourage friends and family, non-photography, spouses, partners, family to come along as well.
Okay.
And I'm actually happy to take fewer photographers. I like to avoid situations where it turns into combat photography with tripods. So yeah, we try to go smaller groups. There are a couple of my competitors who are running with like 20 photographers on a trip, and I don't know how they do it.
Right.
But no, we love having family and friends along. But much of the river is actually fairly benign. It's flat, what we call flat water like this, and you can see a really cool waterfall there. That waterfall only lasted 5 minutes after a thunderstorm and then went away. But yeah, a lot of flat water, a lot of really good times. But eventually you see the boatman's face turn to a look of concern, and you know a rapid's approaching. And if you're on a row trip, which is where the boatman is rowing, you can hear the rapid. I just did a 10-day trip where it was motorized. The drawback to that is you don't get to hear nearly as much. You hear a lot of the motor. But on these road trips, you get to hear the rapid coming. And when their face turns to this expression, you know it's time to double check all your straps, pull your life jacket taut, make sure it's on properly, check your fellow boatmates, and then you head into the whitewater. And it's actually a lot of fun. My wife is in the green helmet there. It doesn't look like she's having fun, but she apparently loves this too. She's actually in the front of the boat there. You can't see her, but she is up there underneath that wave. Slow shutter speed for this, by the way. I purposely shot at like f/22, knocked my ISO all the way down to 50 on this particular camera. And that's because I wanted to capture the motion of the rapid and the movement of the boat. I wasn't super concerned about getting things critically sharp. I wanted chaos. Whereas this image, f/8, probably I think ISO 800, and trying to stop the action. That's me in the boat trying to make sure we don't flip. That's why I'm standing up and leaning into the wave. I had made a big mistake and learning. I was only day 4 for me. My wife thought I was going to die. Obviously, everything works well. But after the big water, everything's back and calm again, and it's just an incredibly peaceful experience, and it really puts you in a great mindset for photography. Night we spend around the campfire. If you look closely, you'll even see stars in the sky. So I got to kind of start moving a little bit quicker. I apologize for running behind. My favorite thing about photographing at river level is not the river itself, but what we call the side canyons. These are tributaries to the Colorado, and there are over 100 of these side canyons, many of which have these beautiful, beautiful waterfalls in them. This is a little waterfall that was not there a year earlier, and I've been told is now gone already. And the reason it's gone is a flash flood came through and it blew out the canyon. That's what they call it. So a bunch of boulders, trees, just rocks and gravel came through and totally changed the environment within this particular canyon. Another reason to keep doing things over and over again. But if you've ever photographed slot canyons, if you guys know what those are, if not, look up slot canyons. They're really cool. This is similar to photographing slot canyons. Very tall, narrow walls on either side. And what we're working with is sunlight that comes in, strikes a wall, and now that light bounces onto the opposing wall. And that's what you're seeing here in this photograph, for example, is reflected light. Same thing in the background here, reflected light. And again, reflected light. So I'm always looking for that reflected light. I'm waiting for the sun to get a little lower in the sky, not low like when we're photographing sunrise and sunset, but low enough that it strikes a canyon wall up high. And just like the moon is reflected light, sunlight is hitting it and reflecting off the surface. It's the same thing.
Adam, what f-stop are you using in most of these?
Good question. So I live with basically, for a full frame camera, let's talk in full frame terms and not my medium format camera, because I know Medium format requires different considerations when it comes to exposure and the exposure triangle. But for full frame cameras in landscape photography, I'm typically shooting at f8 to f16. The higher the resolution of the camera, the more likely I am to avoid going to f16 because of what's called diffraction of light. And this is where you're always gaining depth of field as you close down your apertures, like f8, 11, 16. So you're gaining depth of field, but you start giving up image quality. Nowadays, shooting with a really high resolution camera, I'm often shooting at f5.6 to f8, and I'm focus stacking, meaning I'm taking a picture for the foreground, midground, and background, or I can do that around from your point of view, foreground, midground, background. Sometimes it only takes 3 shots. Sometimes it takes 25. It just depends on the composition and the scene. I actually have a shot coming up where I used focus stacking, so I'll illustrate that. This shot was shot with a 100 megapixel camera, and that camera is very susceptible to diffraction. So this is a softening of the sharp elements in the scene as we close down or stop down the aperture. So for this photograph, the first photo was on the foreground at f8. And then I programmed the camera to move out. And if you guys can see my mouse pointer, to come out a little bit further, it shot again and again and again. And this was around 20 something photographs that I then assembled in helicon focus. And so it gives me incredible image quality. It is a lengthy process. It's not a process I necessarily enjoy because I feel like I end up spending a lot of time dealing with the camera versus enjoying the environment I'm in. I'm really big about being present in the experience. I think that makes you a better photographer. We get lost being stuck behind the camera too often. It's very important to step back from the camera and really be aware of where you are and what's going on. Just enjoy the moment. You'll start to, I'm going to back up, you'll start to notice a theme here. For a while, I was stuck on breaking a rule, putting everything right in the middle, right down the middle of the frame, looking for convergence, looking for lines that were coming together in the middle of the frame. It was just a place I was in creatively. So I'm going to jump forward a little bit here. But you'll see there's actually just so much to photograph below the rim. I love doing abstracts, as you guys saw earlier with my intentional camera movement. That's where I had blurred the trees and the forest. I love looking for abstracts. This is just the canyon walls reflecting on the surface of the river. Same thing again, except I've now flipped the photograph over to make the cliffs face upright. So the reflection in this case is actually upside down. And if you look closely, you can see the moon up there to the right of the peak.
That's cool.
Just love working with these little abstracts. There is so much of this to do. And again, this is another great thing to do on a blue sky day. I start looking for more intimate scenes that are in the shade. So this is all just texture and patterns and shape that are in the rocks. Detail of a beach down at the river. Again, blue sky day. So I waited for this rapid to fall into shade, and I used a long exposure. I believe this was almost 30 seconds. And same thing again, except much shorter, around 5 seconds, I believe. So now we're going to get into what I call towering walls. This is doing the grand landscapes down at river level. I actually do a lot of shooting from the boats. Our boatmen, again, fantastic. I can ask them, hey, can you turn the boat into the current and row against the current, or can you motor against the current? And we call that hovering. They try to get the boat to stay stationary in the current, and we'll shoot some of these scenes handheld. This is a sunrise image, and the river is pink because it's full of sediment or silt. A stream, a side canyon upstream of this point had a flash flood come down it. And I knew the colors of the sunrise would reflect off the surface and just amplify that muddy water, and it would turn pink looking in that morning light. But again, a lot of long lens photography. I see so many people get hung up, and I was this way. If any of you know who David Munch is, 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet him and chat with him for 1 minute. And he asked me what lens I used. And I said, oh, the widest lens I can get. And his advice was start using a telephoto lens more in landscape photography. And I am so thankful for that advice. It opened my eyes to a whole new world of photography outdoors. Moonlit photography. So this is the moon lighting the canyon, and 30-second exposure. And if you look, you can see stars coming through. Again, moonlit. That's the northern arm of the, it's not the right terminology, but the northern sky with part of the Milky Way here cutting right through the scene. And the Andromeda galaxy is that bright fuzzy star right there. This is a place called the Nankoweap Granaries. It's about a 600 to 700 foot climb. And when I say climb, it's a hike. It's not like you're actually climbing, but it's a climb up above the river. And to make this photograph, I actually walked into the scene. It was a 30-second exposure, and I wore dark clothing, and I held a flashlight in my hand. And I knew as long as I didn't stop moving, I could pop the light into each one of these doorways and light up the inside of the I want to call it a cliff dwelling, but it wasn't a dwelling. These are what are called granaries, so it was storage. But I could pop the light into the granary and make it look like it was lit from the inside. And again, I kept moving, so I did not show up in the photograph. I did have to composite the moon for this photograph. The moon was right there. So after I made this photograph, I did a second darker frame just to expose properly for the moon. And then through layer masking in Photoshop, I brought the two images together. Same location and different light. And I apologize for going so fast. I don't want to hold you guys up tonight. Lots of just incredible opportunities. Again, really, really incredible place. There's the world below the rim is so full of color. It's really incredible. Another smoky day at Grand Canyon. So this is from the river, and there was a wildfire just out of view up on the rim to the left. And this is at sunrise. Oh, we're going to have an incredible opportunity to work with layers. So I got the telephoto lens on and said, I want to work with these layers. And again, if you look at the foreground, it's much darker. And as we progress through the scene, it gets brighter and brighter and warmer. That's another thing I like to look for as an artist, those transitions of light, shadow. But in this scene, I'm looking at the transition of cool to warm tones. I love cool to warm transitions whenever I can find them. Just some dramatic light from down at the river. Another example of a blue sky day. The sky was not interesting in the least, so I went with the telephoto lens and decided again to work with layers, just adding a little bit of river at the bottom to give some context as to where we are. But when we get clouds, and I love clouds, who doesn't? I will start going wider angle. This was shot with a 16 to 35 lens. If I remember correctly, up around 20 millimeter. As far as focusing and depth of field, I shot this at f/16. This was on a 50 megapixel camera, so it was a Canon 5D SR. That meant I did give up a little bit of clarity, but I was not at a point where I was comfortable using that technique of focus stacking, and I wanted to try to get even sharpness from foreground to background. Blue sky day, late in the afternoon, and I said, I'm going to break one of those rules. I'm going to let the sky overexpose. In other words, I'm going to let it blow out. And that was to give an impression of heat. So I think you guys have a theme coming up of heat, right? Yeah. And how do you give an impression or a feeling of heat in landscape photography? A couple of ways you can do it. But my combination is to overexpose a bit, to represent the scene a little bit brighter than what the camera wants to make it, and to go with a warmer white balance. And I'll make that white balance selection in post-production, so in Lightroom or Photoshop. But that going a little bit brighter and going warmer will give that impression of heat. I could underexpose and go very blue, and I could make a hot day look cold and dark, where the viewer would actually feel a touch of darkness or coldness on, coldness on their skin. So a little overexposed and warm on the white balance will give a great impression of heat. Another thing you can do, and I like doing this in Lightroom, is grab an adjustment brush and take the dehaze slider in the adjustment brush towards the negative. In other words, you're going to add haze, and I would paint that into that back middle section of the image. And by actually adding a little haze into the scene, you're going to give that feeling of heat in the canyon.
Adam,
in the landscape
when
area.
you're focusing without focus stacking, do you do the focus 1/3 of the way into the picture, or where do you focus?
That's a great question. It really depends on the scene that I'm photographing. With modern camera, especially mirrorless cameras or any camera that has live view, one great way to focus is to engage live view and set your given aperture, and now come down to the bottom of the scene and say, okay, is that in focus? And if it is, now using your joystick, go to the back of the scene. So you've zoomed in again on the preview image, go to the back of the scene. And if the background is slightly out of focus, well, I'll manually focus. I'll turn the ring towards the horizon, towards the distance a little bit. When I do that, I come back to the bottom of the image, to the foreground, and go, okay, is that still sharp? And what I'm looking for is that even sharpness. In other words, I don't want background or foreground to be obviously more sharp than the rest of the image. So I'm just live view, zoom in, set the camera to, let's say, 11 or 16 for an aperture value, and check for even sharpness at foreground and background. That's one of my favorite ways to actually work. I do not use focus peaking, if anybody's wondering. I have not found focus peaking to be terribly accurate. And I've used that on Fuji, Nikon, Canon, and Sony. And they all kind of have the same problem where you'll get the focus peaking highlight saying, hey, it's sharp, it's in focus. And then I get home and go, no, it wasn't. The camera reported that it was, but it was a false positive, so to speak. Does that answer your question about where to focus, Emily? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so just a few more images left here. And I'll finish with this one. This is one of my personal favorites. Very technically challenging to make this image. And I'm going to tell you, it never comes through well in a Zoom session. I've actually got it in print hanging up on my wall here. Is how much I like it as an acrylic Roma framed print, very expensive print. I have it for myself. This image took 7 exposures to make. So I set the camera up for HDR, 1.5 stops apart on the bracketing. And I always start my bracket exposures with the darkest frame and then getting progressively brighter. My reason for that is, imagine you're photographing a brilliant sunrise or sunset. You want to make sure that you capture the proper exposure for the sky before you do the landscape. And that's because the landscape may be a 10-second or 20-second exposure. And if you work backwards, in other words, starting with the exposure for the landscape, for the long exposure, you do a 20-second exposure. The next frame is, say, 7 seconds. The next one is down to 1 second or whatever it is. But by the time you get to the exposure for the sky, the color in the sky may have faded away. So that's why I always start with my dark frame when I'm bracketing. So for this image, though, I wanted to make sure I preserve that quality of light on the river. There was actually a very thin layer of fog. And as soon as sunlight hit that thin layer of fog, it started to glow. And then like that, just snap, was gone. And so I started with that dark frame and then just kept opening up 1.5 stops, getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And then in Lightroom, I did an HDR merge to create a new raw file built off of those 7 images. I wish that was the end of the editing process. I don't like to spend a lot of time in Lightroom and Photoshop, but I will if necessary. I then brought the image into Photoshop, where I did a lot of layer masking using what's called luminosity masking, working with parts of the image based on tonal value. So the lightest parts, the darkest parts, the mid-tone. And that was so that I could selectively build contrast into the scene where I wanted it. But no, this was just one of those moments where, for me, it's a good memory. I was by myself. I wasn't leading a trip, and I was on a river trip, but not leading the trip. And I'd climbed up on one of these cliffs. It doesn't look very high, but I'm probably about 100, 150 feet above the river, and just all by myself, and managed to capture this photo that shows something that's rare which is showing from the river all the way up to the south rim. If you've ever been to the south rim of the canyon, that point all the way up at the top there is Mojave Point. And it's one of my favorite viewpoints. It was kind of neat to be able to capture that golden light with this beautiful sense of atmosphere, how things just fade away into that atmosphere. And yeah, it's one of those images I'm probably a little too proud of, but it is one of my personal favorites, and that's the one I choose to hang on my wall. But I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions you guys might have. Oh, and I'd like to end on this slide. If you don't know who John Wesley Powell was, Powell and his team were the first known explorers to have floated the entire Colorado River. They actually started in Green River, Wyoming. This is back in May of 1869. They started on the Green River. They lost a boat very quickly. I think it was on day 2, and they lost all their survey equipment. So Powell worked for the Geological Survey. He was actually the director at one time. But they flipped a boat, lost that gear. They continued on their journey. The Green River eventually runs into the Colorado up in Utah, and they took the Colorado into what was called at the time the Great Unknown. It was the last uncharted region of what is now the United States. Well, it was then too, obviously, but not all of it. But they went into the Great Unknown, and by the time they came out at the other end, they were near death. Their clothing was in tatters. But Powell thought enough of the journey that he came back and did it again 2 years later. So if it weren't for Powell, we probably wouldn't be where we are today with understanding water in the West and understanding our incredible landscape out here. But I want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to share my favorite place in the world with you and share my passion for photography with you. And if you're not aware, today, June 15th, is the World Nature Photography Day. So it's a day to celebrate nature photography. So for me, it's pretty cool how this worked out.
Someone had a good question about you're using filters. You were going to talk about a little bit.
Oh, yes. So I get a lot of random thoughts that take me down a tangent. Sorry, but so I do use filters nowadays. I'm trying to lighten the load in my pack, and as cameras get better, I'm using filters less and less. So what does that mean? 10 years ago, especially, I used to carry a stack of graduated neutral density filters: 2-stop, 3-stop, 4-stop, soft edge, 2, 3, and 4 hard edge, 2, 3, and 4 what's called a reverse grad, which is clear on the bottom, hard strip of darkness across the middle, and then it fades away towards the top. Great for sunsets, but they're big, they're expensive, and it's like carrying another lens or two, having all of that in your pack. But our cameras were so limited with regards to the dynamic range or the range of light that they could capture that I felt having those filters was absolutely necessary. The newer cameras can record in a single image a much wider range of light. So the highlights don't blow out as soon, or the shadows don't go pure black, blocking up as easily as they once did with the older cameras. I do still use filters. I use circular polarizers sparingly. I think it's very easy to overuse a polarizer. So I tend to turn the polarizer until I get maximum effect, and then I back off a bit. I use UV filters, and I know the people go, oh my gosh, why would you use a UV? What a wasted piece of glass. When you shoot in blowing sand, rain, which has some dust particles in it, believe it or not, snow, I just feel a little bit better having a UV filter on the lens in those environments. And for you Canon shooters out there, Canon actually says that even on your L series lenses, your lens is not truly weather sealed until you have put a filter on it. So, they have those gaskets that seal them, but you have to have a filter on it to complete the seal. So I'm still using the graduated neutral densities somewhat, but I don't feel like I have to carry them with the newer cameras. My GFX 50R, the medium format camera, that sensor is now 5, maybe even almost 6 years old. So even that camera does a great job in dealing with a wide range of light. But the polarizers are a must. You cannot, there's nothing you can do in Lightroom or Photoshop that can do what a polarizer can do on the camera. UV filters, and then I still carry some neutral density filters. That's a solid neutral density when I'm photographing waterfalls, and that is so that I can have a longer shutter speed if I want it. I actually have polarizers now that have a neutral density effect built into the polarizer. So I have polarizers that have a 3-stop ND filter incorporated into it and a 6-stop ND. And that way I can avoid having a polarizer on the lens and having to stack a second filter, the neutral density, on top of it. Instead, it's now one filter with both effects built in. Hopefully that answers the question about filters. I don't really use anything else otherwise.
Adam, do you publish any photography books on the Grand Canyon?
I do. Thanks for helping me out there. I've got this one. See if I can get the glare off of it, called Chasing the Light, Grand Canyon. That was my first book on Grand Canyon. And then Arizona Highways just did this one, Grand Canyon, Earth and Sky. And so that's their book. You'll notice they are both small books, and there's a reason for that. My primary venue for selling these is at Grand Canyon National Park, and people don't want to buy big books and try to fly home with them. But I have just convinced the publisher of the first book, Chasing the Light, to come out with a larger format book. So we're going to be looking at about 11 by 12 inches in size, somewhere around probably 247 to 297 pages. And we're still in the design phase on that one. I'm hoping to have that out within about a year to a year and a half. After that, there will be a book of black and whites of Grand Canyon. So I haven't shown that tonight because that's a whole nother path to go down. But I will have a collection of black and white photos of the canyon in a future book as well.
Okay.
Actually did have a book at one time, since you guys are from Texas, on Big Bend as well. That was actually a self-published book. If you know the website, The Luminous Landscape, many years ago, they had the Luminous Endowment, and they had grants that they awarded, and I was awarded their first landscape photography grant, which was to do a project on Santa Elena Canyon there in Big Bend. And so I'm a big fan of giving yourself a project. I think it makes you a better photographer, gives you something to work towards.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
There's some questions down in the chat.
Oh yeah, no, I'm bad about catching the chat. So let's see. First, where do we start here? Adam, are there types of photos that sell better than others? Great question. Yes, usually any photo other than mine sells better. I like dark and dramatic quite often, and to be honest, that's not something that people will put on their walls. We also have to ask, who are we selling to? Is this, for print on people's walls, or are we talking about magazines? But go easy on the Photoshop work. I think a lot of us, and I'm guilty of this, we tend to go a little bit too far in images that perhaps have less done to them tend to sell better. And that was a hard one for me, a hard lesson for me to learn, because we share our images with our friends in our club. I used to run what was a very popular group back in the day called the Rocky Mountain Nature Photographers. It was part of the Nature Photographer Network, NPN, that kind of predated social media. And what I found in our group was we could make each other happy and we could impress other photographers, but that didn't necessarily lead to sales. And what the public wanted to see and what they wanted to buy was just very different from what impressed us. So that's why I say to back off on the editing a little bit. For some people, it's hard to say everybody needs to do that because I don't know everyone's style. But photos with lots of color, reds tend to go over very, very well with people. If anybody knows who Galen Rowell was, he talked extensively about color and how people respond to color. So he can say a lot more about it than I ever could through his books, that is. Let's see, is the technique focus stacking? Yes, that is the technique that I was talking about for focusing for landscapes. It's a great technique as long as things are not moving. So if you're photographing wildflowers in the wind, trees, aspen trees during fall color, aspens, those leaves, they dance, they rustle. And if you're trying to focus stack something like that, it's not going to line up. I'd be surprised if it did. My waterfall images work because the water was fairly consistent in terms of where it's falling through the scene. There's little splashes that bounce off a rock, and it may not catch those, but yeah, focus stacking is a great tool. And I'm a really big fan of Helicon Focus. That's Helicon. Helicon or Helicon Focus. It's a little pricey, but what it does, you can take your, let's say you have 10 or 20 images in Lightroom, select them all, export them to Helicon. It will then merge the photos into one new photo and send it back to Lightroom as a DNG. So you get another raw file. Most of the other applications out there, Photoshop included, cannot give you a raw file. They will spit out either a JPEG or a TIFF. So Helicon Focus, absolutely fantastic. Did I have any formal art training? Yes and no. Not at a point where it probably would have mattered most. When I was in elementary school, middle school, I did a lot of advanced art courses. I had a chance to work with a person who was a famous artist back in his day, Keith Haring, passed away back in the 90s, but Keith was kind of second place to Andy Warhol. Had a very brief chance to study with him a bit. I used to paint though before I found my way to photography. It was a creative outlet when I was a teenager. I was dealing with a lot of stress, and my mother was in the hospital for many, many years, and I was enrolled by my parents into an art program. And it was recommendation to put me into this program just to give me a creative outlet. So I did have some of that training, but nowadays it's mostly just reading a lot of books. I've got one over my shoulder here on the art of the national parks. I read a lot about how other types of artists see. So, but nothing more formal than that, nothing truly formal. Adam, could you please review your use or non-use of filters? Oh, I think so. We probably did that already. I think I answered that one, but again, my main filter nowadays is the circular polarizer and only using it a partial turn. I've gone much softer in my approach with regards to contrast and pop in the images compared to what I used to do. Let's see, beautiful Grand Canyon photography. Thank you for sharing, and the beauty. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think, oh, no, let's see, gorgeous photographs, and thank you for sharing. So inspiring. Again, thank you for the opportunity to share what I do and share this place that I love. It's much appreciated.
Adam,
yep.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I could listen to another 5 hours of you.
Well, you're too kind. I will talk all day. I'll warn you.
As an aside, your monsoon has hit us here in Kingwood. It's raining outside the house.
Oh, well, everybody run outside, blow real hard to the northwest and send it our way.
Yeah, I'll do that. We're going to take about a 5-minute break.
This place is a place called Holstone Down in Devon, England, right across the channel from Wales. Little town. We stayed in we had a little rented a place in a little town along the coast, the canals, the paths there. Holstone Down is famous because in 1958, you see the stone there, Jesus Christ landed in Holstone Down in a spaceship. This is true. That's what that stone is for. This is where Jesus landed in a spaceship, and I thought it was a nice place for a pretty sunset. So that was a nice trip. This was up in Iceland, about 2 years ago, just before the pandemic sometime, northern Iceland. At about 1:30, 2 in the morning, this is sunrise. Sunset was about 30 minutes before that. So and you can see the volcano in the background. So anyways, this was Iceland, 2:30 in the morning. This was sort of a long-ish exposure.
Okay.
You know, not real slow, but long-ish.
Beautiful.
And the last one, I set myself a challenge before I show you this next one. I've been doing a lot of still life photography during the pandemic. You know, I like landscapes, but these are inside landscapes. And I set myself a challenge the last couple of months to do a still life on the theme of the month. So I thought clouds. That's hard. That's hard to do in still life. So I created a still life of clouds. This is mate time. Mate is a drink that's that people in Argentina,
Yes.
Chile, and places will. It's a tea. It's like a tea. So this is a still life. Hey, for the people like who don't like Photoshop, this is all Photoshopped. So when you say go light on Photoshop, you're not talking to me. And anyways, this it was a still life. I mean, it is truly a pot. It's truly a mate bowl and everything. The background is different, and all the steam is added with brushes.
Nice.
Anyways, I'll go on. Chris Summers.
Chris?
Oh, hi. Hi, folks. I'm in from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm helping my sister who just got her knee replaced today, and they had her up walking. It's amazing how they do these things. So anyway, this was shot in Aruba, and I've always loved, we just happened to be driving down the road, and I told my wife, we got to pull over, got to take a picture. And these windsurfers were out, and we had these beautiful clouds that almost mimic the angle of the windsurfer with his kite that pulls him along. So it's just clouds can be anything from dark and ominous to bright and beautiful. So that's my shot. And what's next? Oh, this is up in Kenai, Alaska. Somewhere we found a little trestle, and there were these low clouds, and we've all seen these occasionally. That's more, I think, more in the fall, winter months where you get these kind of creeping clouds that come down maybe when the hot air is mixing with the cold air. But the theme was clouds, so I was looking. And here's our own River Grove Park, taken from that little bridge that crosses over to the soccer fields. And one day I went down there, and I said, God, this is like an Ansel Adams day with the clouds. And so I did a black and white and really played with. There were a lot of people over on this right bank picnicking, and I used the adjustment brush, and they're all gone now. So.
Lovely.
Okay. Emily,
this is mine. I went out to photograph bluebonnets, and there are these horses out there that I really had a boring sky, so I confess that I did replace the sky in this photograph.
Nice job.
Because the sky kind of makes it, if it was just solid blue, it'd be pretty boring.
It looks nice.
And yeah, this is a cormorant on the lake calling whoever.
Mrs. Cormorant.
And this one is in Florida. And I got up early in the morning, and the sun was just rising, and there was a storm moving in, and it was just majestic. I did not play with the sky on this one. It is what it is. It was fabulous.
that hangs on your wall in your house too. It's beautiful.
Huh?
That's on your wall in the house, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
But Emily brings up a good point, and I don't know how many of our club members do this. How many of us go on vacation and we still get up? 5 in the morning. I'm going to get a good photograph, so I do that a lot. So, and in the end, if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. But if you had missed it, you would have missed it forever. So it's better to get up and look for it. So.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
exactly. I was just going to ask: Is Bill Baird online now?
Yeah, I think
okay. Let me go back quickly to Bill's.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I just want to make sure you were there. Okay, Bill.
Okay. Well, let's say if you ever driven through Amarillo on Interstate 40, you passed by Cadillac Ranch, and an eccentric oil man and artist, Stanley Marsh III, buried these Cadillacs hood down, and so they've been a tourist attraction for many years. But I thought the combination of that and the West Texas sky made a good picture. This just down at the near River Grove Park. One day I was walking along, and this very strange formation came. I'm sure that climatologists have a name for those type of clouds, but I thought they were most unusual. And this is on Lake Kingwood. I used to live when I lived in Trailwood. I was over there quite often. near sundown and sunset. And so this is an image that I captured on at Lake Kingwood.
Good. Thank you, Bill.
So these 3 photos are from my latest storm chasing tour.
Wow.
And this is just northwest of Lubbock, supercell at night. You see the stars off to the left.
Yeah. So what kind of exposure do you do on that?
These are 15-second exposures. The lightning was so bright that it was hard to run a time lapse on this sequence, but you got a few good ones.
Yeah.
That is incredible. That's a really incredible
Yeah.
shot.
That's a beautiful shot.
Thank you.
Wow. Ah,
Oh, there
So-
they are.
There's your mammatus.
Mammatus clouds.
So this was a storm that was kind of dying out, but the mammatus were highlighted by a setting sun that was coming in from behind.
what are they called?
Mammatus.
Mammatus clouds, like booby clouds.
Yeah, that's mammary,
Yeah.
where the term came from.
That's pretty neat. Is that lightning in that storm back there?
There is lightning.
Yeah.
I don't think I got any in that shot, but
No, I just was wondering if the storm's much lit up back there. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that's actually sunlight that's highlighting the top of that
okay.
storm.
All right. Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
And then-
Another cool one.
This is a big, what they call a low precipitation supercell. So there was very little rain, but when we pulled up, it had just dropped a tornado, and we missed the tornado, but we followed the storm for a while. And after it hit sunset and kind of lit up the clouds behind it, and it was just an amazing scene.
Very nice.
Oh, yeah, spectacular.
Yeah, beautiful.
The time lapse will be pretty cool.
Oh, you have a time lapse for that?
Yes,
Oh, you're gonna have to post that.
I will.
On the Facebook group or something.
Okay.
Jim's not here.
Okay, I have his stuff. Jim,
Okay,
I
good.
have his.
Go for it.
He also didn't get the memo where he's supposed to be.
You're cutting out.
Oh, this is horses on hills north of Flathead Lake, Montana.
Okay.
Very nice. Yeah.
There's clouds there for sure. Okay, now, not knowing which order we're going in, it's either the Buffalo Plains in Montana, which probably this one is. 'Cause I don't see a lake.
Okay.
That's pretty. Ah, this is the lake. This is the north side of Flathead Lake, Montana, taken in October. I guess you can see the snow on there too.
Yeah.
And then the clouds.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it is. It's very pretty. I can't claim them as mine.
I think, John?
Yep, I'm here. This was taken just before COVID hit in early 2020. I was over to check out the Eagles in Morgan City, Louisiana, and this is the bridge across the Atchafalaya River. The storm had just come through and really lit the sky up with the sunset that night.
Very nice.
Next one.
Oh,
And this is taken on the road between Telluride and Ridgeway in western Colorado. Interesting thing is I'm facing east. So the sun is setting behind me and it's coming all the way across the sky and bouncing the light off of these skies to light up the mountains in the distance. It's kind of a unusual thing to have the light bounce off of the clouds and light up the mountains to the east.
That's beautiful, John. Really a
Okay.
good shot.
So I'm back to this. So what the heck? Let's go back to that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mm. Oh,
Is Julie around?
really?
Hello, Julie.
We have. She was here. Let me look through that.
You might have lost power too.
Could have. I don't think. Oh, she's on. She's on. There's no I don't see any microphone. There's no sound.
Okay.
Julie, if you don't mind, we'll look at the pictures slowly and admire them. Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can sort of hear.
Hello.
Hello?
Not really.
Hey, Julie. Oh, heck, I don't know why this just keeps on going back here. Let me, Julie. There we go.
Oh, that's pretty.
That is, that's beautiful, isn't it? Look at the starburst. That looks like it's where is that lake?
It's on Woodland Hills,
It is?
between Kingwood
Deer
Drive
Park.
and the river.
Yeah, yeah.
Duck Pond.
Where the gazebo is.
Oh. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, yay, power.
And we know where that is. That's
Yeah.
Yep.
well, that sure did. They've opened that up now more, haven't they?
Yes, yes.
They've dredged it.
Yeah.
Pretty.
Okay.
Shoot.
All right. We're up here in Alaska, and I seem to like clouds that are not necessarily in the sky. So I'm giving you a different aspect of it. And of course, over there in Dockstein, when you're up there hiking, you just don't know when the clouds are going to come and go. And they do a lot of that as you're up there.
Mhm. That's an interesting effect of the clouds funneling up the side of the mountain, I guess.
Yes, yes. It's amazing how fast they move too.
It's like a rainbow of clouds.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're right. Right. And this is where I'll be tomorrow. So I like them in the water.
I hate you. Bad joke. I wish I could be there with you.
Me too.
I hope you're not flying Southwest Airlines. They're all.
No, I will get there. I will get there. And this is Schwabacher's Landing in the Tetons, one of our favorite spots to get pictures. So,
yep.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be there in the morning.
Well, no, it'll be the afternoon.
Oh, that's right. Okay. We're leaving in the morning.
Steve. We got Steve here still?
Maybe he lost power too.
Yeah, I think this storm was, I almost lost power here.
Steve's
in South Dakota. He's not here. He's not in Kingwood. He's up in South Dakota. So
that's right. He's in South Dakota. That's right. I do not see his name here on the list. I'm looking through it.
Okay.
Okay. God, beautiful picture. He tells you how he shot it, but doesn't tell us about the picture itself.
Beautiful. Wow, really pretty.
Yeah. Very nice. Okay.
All right. Hey.
Beautiful.
So finally got to go somewhere a couple months ago. We went to Disney briefly. We didn't go any parks, but well, water park and the pools, just a place to get away. But this is where we stayed, their old Key West resort. We were staying actually right across the way in one of those places to the far side on the left there. And golf course was shut down, so I ran around the golf course, got on the bridge, and I got a shot of what I could see of the sunset and the clouds that day.
Nice.
That's nice.
Kingwood Lake from the far side, kind of right after the path there, kind of around the corner where the path turns and goes back towards Kingwood Drive. They ran out there one evening because we had some pretty cool clouds moving through, but it's kind of funny. About 2 or 3 minutes later, there were no clouds in the sky. They just blasted right on through, and it was clear sky right after that. So it was just the right time. And that's Royal Shores, a little different kind of cloud there. Same thing, just decided to take a walk out there one evening. It looked like we might have a nice sunset. Found a tree for my foreground, so something in there.
Nice, very nice. Kathy, of course, is in Hawaii. Jim, do you have anything on hers?
Yeah, well, she's on the Big Island, and she took this a couple of days ago where they
Nice.
they had the Milky Way, and there's a little light pollution from the resort down at the bottom, but it's pretty striking.
Nice.
And Kathy did this one, Sunrise in Destin.
Oh, that's where my storm photo was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice.
I don't know where that is.
Well, she says Hawaii. Hawaii.
Dramatic clouds.
Hawaii. Okay.
There's is that a road down there, I guess?
Yeah, it's an interesting shot because that road almost, it looks like a double exposure, but I think it's below the cloud cover.
That's what I was thinking. It looks like that road goes into a hole or something.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to drive down it.
That's right.
Oh, it's Sydney.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I call this batten down the hatches.
Mhm.
And that's the iconic Sydney Opera House. I was shooting it in the morning. I got up like Chris, I think said, you have to get up early before anybody else. And I walked out on the harbor there, and there was a whole lineup of other photographers taking pictures of the Sydney Opera House. And so we caught up with this storm coming up from behind it that morning. So it turned out
reflections are nice.
yeah, it turned out pretty well actually. And this one I call Molten Sky. This is also on the same trip. We were actually in a small bus traveling across the outback when this was the sky that was presented to us as the sun was setting. And there was a point where I couldn't see anything other than this orangish red sky. And it was reflecting into the windows to the point where I had this case of vertigo. I didn't even know which way was up. I had to actually close my eyes because I couldn't orient myself. But very dramatic picture, like molten rocks.
Oh.
And finally, I call this Hidden in the Mist. This is our Antarctica trip a couple of years ago. Just shot this with my cell phone, stepped out on the deck of the ship that we were on, and it was kind of a mid-morning, and I liked how the clouds kind of misted across different things, and kind of you can see a little bit of this, but something is hidden behind it, and I think it gave kind of a dramatic story.
It looks cold.
Well, actually, surprisingly enough, down there in Antarctica, in the middle of winter when you go down, this was late November. It was 32 degrees during the day, it wasn't bad at all, actually.
And at night?
At night got kind of cold. But during the day when the sun, but generally it wasn't as cold as you think.
Hey, Bill, Adam here. Have you tried this as a black and white?
I have not tried this one. I do have some other similar ones that I did try as a black and white, and particularly if you crank the contrast up, they can be quite dramatic.
Yeah. And that's not to say that the color doesn't work. I think it's awesome. Great photo, by the way. I'm in a black and white mindset at the moment, and I see a strong black and white potential.
Yeah. I do try black and white with a lot of my photos, but I do think it gives them a completely different feel to them.
Oh, sure.
And you can play with them, and the colors don't get your way, and you can do contrast and things like that, and it makes them very dramatic. But that's a good point. I hadn't tried this one with black and white. I had tried some similar ones with it that turned out quite well.
Yeah, Bill, if you do it black and white, send it to Adam.
Even if you've ever done any toning of black and white, it's like a split toning where you put a touch of warmth and highlights and a touch of coolness in the shadows. You don't want it to be obvious to the viewer. It can really have a dramatic effect.
Black and whites are funny because the only pictures I have hanging on my wall that are my own are black and whites.
Interesting.
They make good hanging pictures.
Beautiful photo.
Yeah, beautiful. See if I can get this next. Oh, there we go. That's it.
Okay. Next meeting, July the 20th. I've got a to be named or to be determined. There's a lady that I'm working with and talking to who is a diver and underwater photographer, and I'm hoping that she'll speak to the club. I need to get her confirmation that she'll speak to the club for July about underwater photography.
And at some point, we need to get Adam back to talk about black and white.
There you go.
Yeah, we could, if you guys want, we could even do that one as an editing session. You know, if you
Oh,
want
that'd be kind of like a workshop.
through the process.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Sure would.
Jim,
Well, I'm
write
going
that
to
down.
leave because my power keeps flipping on and off. So good to see you, and thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Well,
Hi, Emily. Stay cool.
Emily, I know you live a block behind me, so I'm out of town, but I know my lights are out. But I hope you
I was
get
going
over
to ask you, but you're not even home. You
the
don't get
power
to
should be
enjoy
on
it.
hopefully in a couple hours.
Yeah, I got no AC right now.
Oh no.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye, Emily.
The last thing is share and learn for July is shadows. And you can be thinking about August. The share and learn is going to be nature.
Okay.
And I think, is that the last slide?
Yes, yes, it is, Jim.
Okay. Well, gentlemen and ladies, I think we're done. Adam,
Thanks, Jim, for handling
tell you how
it.
much we've enjoyed your talk. It was
Very
fantastic.
much.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks,
Very good.
Adam. Great